Hi, I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., your HHS Secretary. I'm here with my colleague and friend, Brooke Rollins, as the USDA Secretary, Iron Chef and friend, Jeffrey Zakarian, and John Kurz, who's the CEO and president of the Tampa General Hospital. Last June, Dr. Oz and I asked all the hospitals in the country to take a pledge called the Make Hospital Food Healthier Pledge. And Tampa General was the first to exercise the leadership to take that pledge. It's transformed its kitchens, it brought in Chef Zakarian, and we just ate a meal here, and it was the kind of meal that you would eat in the finest restaurant in this country.
As you have changed the way you feed your patients here, up to 25% and even more is from local foods, or local farmers and ranchers. And that is the way. That's how we move this forward. So, Chef, again, really cool to see you at work. The best chicken noodle soup I've ever had in my entire life, no kidding, was in the kitchen here at the Tampa General Hospital.
Well, it's an honor to do this, and I'm just so tickled pink that you're all here and seeing this firsthand. We've been working on this for over 2.5 years. This has been a passion project of mine, and I just want to get back to original food. So single origin foods, and the patients love it. We're making yummy, delicious food, and the chicken noodle soup is one example of what's yummy and what feels good when you're sitting in a hospital bed.
This is one of the most worthwhile things I will do in my career. Looking at food as medicine is critically important to care delivery and to wellness.
So we encourage now all the hospitals in the country to take this pledge and emulate what's happening here with such incredible results at Tampa General.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
It's not about buying a new knife set, and it's not about having all the top-notch materials and equipment. It's about just understanding intellectually how food works.
Hi, I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., your HHS Secretary. Welcome to the Secretary Kennedy Podcast. My guest today is America's Chef, Andrew Gruel. And Andrew has been one of the great proponents for eating real food in this country and for cutting through the complexity of the food system and explaining to Americans what the source of their food is. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Talk about what your journey has been.
So for me...
and by the way, we're in Huntington Beach, California at Andrew's house today.
Yes.
And we just cooked an incredible meal for our new The Real Food show. And you'll see when you watch it why Andrew is such a superstar. We cooked a salmon cake meal for $5 using fresh caught wild caught Alaskan salmon. And you can make the same meal for about $2.50 using canned salmon. Really high quality meal with all the proteins and nutrients we need. But one of the things we're trying to show people is that good food is not more expensive food. It's just smarter.
100%.
And by the way, it only took 12 minutes to make the meal. So
yep. Yeah, 12 minutes. And that's a long 12 minutes. I mean, realistically.
That's faster than driving to the McDonald's.
Yeah. Exactly. So my journey, I grew up in Jersey, and I actually did not have a broad food palate growing up. I was a latchkey kid, right? Both two working parents, microwave generation, started having really bad stomach issues when I was 14 or 15. Never thought it was the food, but I'll get back to that. I went to a small liberal arts college up in Maine, became obsessed with seafood in the coast up there. I was actually studying more environmental literature and kind of social political philosophy, but I was spending most of my time in restaurants working and out at the docks learning about seafood, Maine lobster fisheries, because my stomach was so bad I had to be in one place for long periods of time. Well, the kitchen was perfect for me, 13, 14, 15-hour shifts in one place, and that was it. So after 2 years in college, I actually ended up leaving college and then just taking my journey through the restaurant industry, studying and training all over the country as well as a little bit internationally. And in 2008, when the economy tanked, I was running restaurants in New Jersey at the time, and they actually shut down, and I lost my job. And the only thing that was available in terms of work was granted programs, right? Grant money was still out there. Now, I had since gone back. I had gotten a business degree and a degree in food marketing, food service management, plus had the chef side of things. At the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, California, they were looking for a chef with a marketing background to start a sustainable seafood program. They determined that since 80% of the seafood in California is consumed in restaurants, if they could get a chef to train consumers how to buy the right types of seafood with the ultimate goal of increasing our per capita consumption of seafood, then they could start in California and that trend would go nationwide. So I went from running restaurants to being deep inside the world of fisheries management, supply chain management, understanding even marine biology, marine conservation, and hitting the streets and trying to train both chefs and consumers about how to eat the right types of seafood, but eat more types of seafood. And it was an eye-opening experience, but after 3 years of doing that, it was a 3-year program, I said, I'm not going to continue I'm not going to continue trading in nonprofits. I'm going to go out and do it myself. So I maxed out my credit cards. I borrowed money from friends and family. It was about $35,000 at the time. I started a concept called Slapfish, fish so fresh it'll slap you, using only local seafood directly from the fishermen. And then I started that with one food truck, and then I grew that into a fast casual location worldwide. And my wife and I sold that. We opened about 45 or 50 locations, and we sold that in 2022. So that was kind of my culinary journey. And all along the way, I did Food Network. And then when the pandemic hit, I started speaking out about more political issues and got dropped from all those, got sued by the state of California, went through my political journey, and here I am.
How did you get sued by the state of California?
Well, I wasn't necessarily sued by the state of California. 6 days after I went on a media tirade saying that Newsom was, my words were, he was an a-hole, we got served a labor investigation by the state of California on 23 different LLCs with my name on it, 11 of which were single-member LLCs with no employees. So it goes to show you.
Warfare.
Yeah. And that went on we spent about $125,000, and that's where there was, counters, and ultimately it was dropped. Ironically, or coincidentally, the day the governor's recall was approved was the day our lawsuit was dropped.
So what are you doing now? What are you doing now to promote good food?
So we do videos. Lauren and I, my wife, we have a show called American Gravy, and really I just go on a media tour trying to teach consumers, trying to teach children, trying to teach families how to actually engage with the elements they already have in the kitchen, right? And I say that because it's not about buying a new knife set, and it's not about having all the top-notch materials and equipment. It's about just understanding intellectually how food works. And we know this already innately, right? We know how food works. Food is the great unifier. Every single generation has stories, and all of them are rooted in food. And it's the one language that we can all speak is food, right? If you think about it, our entire world view is shaped by food in some manner or another. And we want to be able to teach people how to wrap their arms around that and embrace food as opposed to being afraid of it and it being an afterthought, whether it's driving through McDonald's, just picking up a bag of chips. Because that's the way in which I grew up. And I loved history and I understood it, but I never knew the role that food had in my life. I should tell you along that journey, and I mentioned I dropped out of college because of my stomach problems, it wasn't until 2013 or 14 that I cut seed oils and processed food out of my diet that my stomach got healed. Now this is really interesting, and I've never really elaborated on this story. I didn't cut seed oils out of my diet because I thought, oh, this is gonna heal me. I did it because what I learned when I was working with the aquarium was that we have a seafood deficiency in our diet, which ultimately ends up with an omega-3 and a DHA deficiency. 6 of the 8 leading causes of death at the time, to some degree, could be alleviated through a much more regular, healthy consumption of those omega-3 fatty acids, primarily found in seafood. And so what I was trying to do was to increase my omega-3s, but also decrease my 6s. Because I realized I couldn't eat enough seafood in order to kind of get rid of that imbalance that I constantly talk about, right? I think 100 years ago, our omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, and you may know better than I, was like 3-to-1. And now I think it's 20-to-1. And that's the cause of so much internal inflammation and chronic disease and autoimmune disorders, etc. So me personally trying to focus on my health, when I cut out the seed oils in an attempt to have my 3s take over, and then I stopped. In doing so, I had to stop the processed food. I had to stop the chips, because when you look on a package, you think you're eating nuts. You're eating nuts cooked in canola oil. They're in everything. So when I did that, within 3 to 4 months, my stomach problems were fully healed, 100%. And then my wife, Lauren, she did the same thing, like, altering her diet, and she started noticing that it was healing her. So it was at that point that I kind of had a mental change where I realized I need to get more Americans. The one way I can change the world is to actually get more Americans to cook more and eat the right types of food. And in doing so, one of the tertiary effects is that you also now are supporting American ranchers and farmers and fishermen and the real people throughout the entire supply chain that actually make this country run.
You know, the impression is that fast food and ultra-processed foods are cheaper.
Yeah.
Is that true?
No, and I know that because I'm the one who actually buys it and cooks it, and I also did in the past a lot of consulting, especially in that fast casual world. It's not cheaper, right?
You actually worked for Denny's for a while, right?
I did work at Denny's. Wow, you know your stuff. I did, yeah. Moons. I was the king of moons over my hammy, the Della Dinger. So it's not when you're cooking real food and you're doing it. Let's use beef tallow, for example. That's a hot topic right now. Restaurants say we can't cook with beef tallow because it costs so much more. Well, the point that I make is that no, it actually doesn't. Because number one, you use less of it. A little bit goes a longer way. It's much more, the flavor isn't stronger. The flavor is cleaner. When you're cooking and frying in canola oil and all these junk oils, number one, you have to replace it consistently. Number two, it breaks down so quickly, which leads to internal oxidation. With beef tallow, I use half the amount that I otherwise would have if I was rolling canola oil on my grill. So when you look at it, it's actually a net zero economically. Higher quality ingredients go further. Even if they cost more, it's a matter of how you utilize them in the kitchen. So that's why I lean into the technique piece, because it's not more expensive to eat the right types of food, whole foods, real foods, American food. It just takes a little bit more effort. But if that effort can ultimately become inexpensive, then we can overcome the battles that we see, especially when it comes to the chronic disease epidemic in America.
What's the most important thing that consumers should understand? What are the best tricks for buying your own food and cooking it?
Buy the cheapest meat at the grocery store, whatever's on sale. Typically the most flavorful cuts of meat are the offcuts that everybody doesn't like. We never eat ribeye, filet, or strip steak here. We always eat flat iron, cuts from the shoulder, Denver steaks. We eat the skirt steak, the flat steak, the hanger steak, oxtail, the meats that braise and break down. Chefs know those are the most flavorful cuts of meat because they have all that beautiful connective tissue. It's all the flavor, but you need time to be able to break it down and braise it and cook it slowly so it's meltingly tender. But you can just plug in a crock pot nowadays and do it. We have the tools to be able to do this. So I buy the cheapest cuts of meat. I buy the underutilized offcuts of seafood. Seafood I've never heard of. If you've never heard of it, it's probably caught locally because we have labeling standards when it comes to seafood in the United States. In a lot of the imported seafood, they can call it catfish up to a couple years ago, right? When they're dropping Pangasius or swai onto the market, the Vietnamese catfish farmers. But you want to buy the American catfish right here or some of the other underutilized species of seafood. And then when it comes to cooking fats, right? First, make your own cooking fats. I rarely do buy beef tallow. Instead, I use the fat that's already inherent in the meat that I'm cooking because that fat actually cooks the meat and gives it a better sear. Anytime I cook bacon, I always keep my bacon fat at all times. And then when it comes to making vinaigrettes, sauces, condiments, make them yourself at home. It's always less expensive. 2 eggs right now and a little bit of avocado oil, a dash of Dijon mustard, and a lemon is going to cost you $3.25. If I went and bought Chosen Mayo or a name brand avocado oil mayo or even a Hellmann's, which is made with canola oil, it's going to be $9 to $10 volume to volume for the same weight. But it's $3 to $6 less if you make it here at home and takes 15 seconds. It's easy. And if you have kids, that's where you get the kids in the kitchen. These are science experiments. Our kids love being in the kitchen, whipping up mayos, whipping up vinaigrettes, breaking down seafood, breaking down whole fish. And when they cook it, when they prep it, they eat it themselves because they take ownership and they have culinary equity in that dish.
Yeah, I remember when I was growing up, we would make bacon in the morning, but we'd always pour the bacon grease into a coffee can and keep it for later for cooking.
Yeah, we have a mug, but Lauren doesn't let me buy coffee in the can anymore ever since the accident. No, I'm just joking. I'm joking.
And how do we make restaurants? How do we get restaurants to to give us the healthiest foods?
You got to continuously ask questions. So if the restaurant knows that the consumers want something, they're always going to make the change. Now that little something might come with a bit of an extra cost, but in the restaurant industry, because of our volume, an extra cost to us, if I added 50 cents to every item on my menu today, I could add 13 to 15% to my bottom line. So if you're willing to pay an extra 50 cents for a restaurant to be using beef tallow, I guarantee you that in the long run, the cost when it comes to healthcare and feeling good is going to outweigh whatever extra cost you could have paid at the time. And I'll use the example of our restaurants. When I realized how much the seed oil change helped me in our restaurants, our seafood restaurants in 17 and 18, we started switching a lot of the oils out. And we started switching to saturated fats as opposed to a lot of the cheap soybean oils, canola oil, vegetable oil, you name it. Customers started coming into the restaurant and saying, how can I eat your fish and chips and I don't even feel as if I ate fish and chips? Like I could run a marathon afterwards. And I explained to them, I said, it's the oil, it's the fats. And we started explaining to them. And nah, I can't really be back. And then the customers would come back and they'd say, you know, I ate fish and chips or I ate fried chicken at this restaurant and I felt like junk. And I tested it. I came back here and I ate it again. Same feeling. Tasted clean. I didn't have that feeling of that heaviness. And once customers started realizing that, we were then able to train a lot of our franchisees at the time, because I had franchised my concept, that, look, that's the value right there. A customer who comes back twice is worth whatever you would spend in marketing to get that customer in once. $500, $1,000, you know, extrapolate that across hundreds of customers. So if I'm asking you to switch over to a tallow or even a mix of a tallow and a pure olive oil in order to maybe have a higher smoke point, I could convince my franchisees to do that, but it took the customers coming in and demanding it. And restaurateurs want that. We don't like Yelp. We love hearing it directly from you. So when you go in and tell a chef or a restaurateur, I would love to see you use this particular product, they'll usually do it as long as enough customers tell you.
Chef Andrew Gruel, thank you very much. America's Chef, very, very grateful to you for your commitment to good food and for your leadership and vision. And thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
You are launching the Real Food Show, and this is going to showcase inexpensive and healthy meals. You're going to teach people all across the country, Secretary, how to eat whole, real foods and how much easier and truly inexpensive it can be.
Yeah, Laurel, one of the, criticisms that we got, or concerns, let me put it this way, when Brooke Rollins and I, the USDA Secretary, flipped the food pyramid and we put real food back in, we took out the Fruit Loops, the ultra-processed food, and we put protein and grains and fruit and vegetables in. One of the concerns people had is, are we going to be able to afford this? Isn't real food actually more expensive? And as Chef Robert Irvine has pointed out, he is actually, by giving the troops better food, he's saving 26% on every meal to the military. So you do not need more money to eat good food. And one of the things that we're doing to try to teach Americans how to buy food and how to eat real food at affordable prices is this Real Food Show that people can watch now on my YouTube channel on Secretary Kennedy. And we're going to have a famous chef in every week, cook a meal for around $3 a portion of high quality food that any American can get. And we're going to do it very fast too. We've told the chefs we want fast, convenient meals that are also affordable and really good.
Every parent is looking exactly for that, Secretary, so I'd love to hear it. That's amazing.
This is just, this story makes my blood boil. More than $200 billion. That's how much fraud Vice President Vance says his task force has found, and good for them, in less than 6 months. Vance meeting with lawmakers today saying we need better sentencing for these people. I mean, basically, you have to make examples of these individuals to break apart these businesses that are thriving in certain neighborhoods around the country. He says it's despicable. Watch this.
We've been able to stop $56 billion in fraudulent payments that would have otherwise gone to fraudsters rather than to the people who need them. And in the process, we've saved, obviously, the American people a lot of money.
So, I mean, this is low-hanging fruit. That's the problem. It's very easy in too many cases to pull off this kind of fraud. Here's one example. A suspect accused of claiming to be providing home health care to a Medicaid recipient, but then they looked at his Instagram or her Instagram on vacation in Miami while supposedly billing this client. Watch.
We have home care services billed that were not rendered by aides that were dead, that were in prison, that were selling drugs, aides who billed over 24 hours a day repeatedly for a year, aides who billed halfway around the world in Saudi Arabia, aides who were billing while jet-setting across the Caribbean and Europe.
Dr. Mehmet Oz, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services Administrator, was there at that Justice Department hearing or speaking press conference, excuse me, and he announced these new charges. Dr. Oz, thank you very much. It's great to have you with us today, sir. This Philadelphia scam is reminiscent of what we've seen in other places. You know, how big is this problem? I guess we'll start there.
Massive. The vice president, who has been tackling this with the anti-fraud task force that the president put together, is using an all-of-government approach, which is why you're seeing us now getting our arms around this problem. But, Martha, I want to give people confidence. This is very much like the border crisis from 2 years ago. The one thing that was lacking in closing the border was the will of the federal government to close the border. Once the president decided he wanted to close, it was closed. The president is deciding, vice president supported the entire task force. All of us want this problem dealt with. That gentleman speaking, David Metcalf, is the U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, basically. That building behind us was the federal holding area. It's the jail. Someone in that jail was theoretically getting care as a home health care provider from his wife. That was part of the fraud. And you know what he said? He said, everyone's doing it. If you're going to arrest me, you're going to have to arrest everybody in Philadelphia. Another perpetrator who went to that jail was literally picked up on drug charges, wanted to lock out, sign out from his home care gig that he was doing as a side hustle, and he said, I needed to do it. And they said, what are you talking about? He said, well, yeah, we're all doing it. You know, it's the best kept secret in Philadelphia. And the reality is all these grifters have come from other areas, drugs and other criminal entities, because we've invited them into the federal government to steal our money. And it started during COVID, when a lot of money was thrown against the wall and a lot of it was taken, and it was for the prior administration didn't go after it. So now we've got crises in cities and states across the country. We were in Philly yesterday because they've got a huge problem with home health care and home care itself. They're worst 5 in the country at both paying too much but also having too many people on it who don't deserve it. You and I were talking about Flushing, Queens in the past. Flushing, Queens, which is also the headquarters for the Chinese mafia, which runs human trafficking on the East Coast, is funding their operations with social adult daycare centers, stealing billions of dollars from New York Medicaid, which, of course, the federal system reimburses to Pennsylvania and New York. And let's go to California, where a third of all the hospices in the entire country are in Los Angeles. And here's the part that's crazy. We shut down over half of them. People aren't complaining. Literally, the fraud is so big, when you go after them, they just run away to the next gig they're going to try to steal from. So we have now uncovered so many wasps' nests of fraud in the system that the question is, how are we going to get them all together? And I think the vice president's right. We need more aggressive penalties. When you steal money from the federal government, you ought to go to jail, and go to jail for a long time. We need to, and Congress is doing this, give us the support to be able to go off and get these bad guys. But the American people need to know that this is a fight not about money. It's not even about health. They're stealing our trust. We're moving from a high-trust society to being a low-trust society because Americans don't steal from the poor. It's just not what we do.
Well, the problem is there's
a lot of folks who come from other countries who are doing this.
100%. I mean, there have been too many years where there's no accountability. We have 5 agencies in the government that I researched yesterday that are supposed to be watching where this money goes. I don't know what the heck they were doing before you all started this initiative, but they were not doing their jobs. So those people should be fired. They should be reprimanded. We should know who they are because they didn't do their job. And now you're telling me that the Chinese mafia, you know, we need to, what is the Department of Justice doing? Are they going to arrest these Chinese mafia members who are literally ripping off American taxpayers in the name of providing home care in Flushing, just a few miles from here?
Martha, what a beautiful question. Here's the reality. I met with the Southern District. You know, this is a prominent group of law enforcement officers, and what they tell me is that the rules that govern these programs are so poor. They have an unlicensed person providing an unmonitored service in an unmonitored setting. Who are they going to go after? So we have to actually create rules that law enforcement can enforce. And when you have, it is a racket. And I'll tell you, in my agency, to answer your first part of that question, we had 6 people left in the agency doing fraud in Medicaid. The prior administration told people, we don't want you going after this. I don't want to be embarrassed, they said, with you finding things that don't jive with our philosophy. So you guys go do something else, keep yourself busy, or leave. But I don't want you telling us about fraud. When I came into the agency, we had a lot of people who actually wanted to deal with these problems, who were told that they couldn't before, and they are now aggressively doing their jobs. Good. That's why we have been so successful. We've already stopped $42 billion from leaving this building. We have a lot more to do, Martha. And I pledge to you, on behalf of the task force, we're showing up for work every day.
Well, I'm so glad to hear it, Dr. Oz, because this is disgusting, and we can't have foreign countries ripping off our taxpayers as well as homegrown. There are places where the largest category of work in the entire state is home care, in this vague sort of category where money's getting sucked out of our pockets. So thank you for what you're doing. I got to leave it there. Dr. Mehmet Oz, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you for being here today.
God bless.
You as well. All right. Ugh, that is so disgusting. I hate that story, but they have to crack down on it.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox 1.
President of the United States.
Thank you all. Good to see you guys. Thank you. Here, have a seat, please. Well, good morning, everybody. It's good to see you all. And we are here to kick off what has, at this point, been an informal effort, which is working with Congress to help us combat fraud. So as you know, when the President of the United States started the Fraud Task Force and really set the federal government to taking a whole-of-government approach to the anti-fraud issue, that was mainly an administrative thing. That was something we were working with our colleagues at H&HS, at DOJ, at all of the various agencies of the federal government in trying to root out fraud. And I'd remind all of you and remind the American people and remind what these congressmen and senators don't need reminding, which is that fraud is really a dual victim crime. The most obvious victim, of course, is the American taxpayer, who has their hard-earned tax dollars stolen from them to enrich people who are violating our laws and taking advantage of our country. But I think more profoundly and more sadly, the second victim of fraud are the people who benefit from programs that the American people have set up in their generosity and in their kindness of spirit, and those programs don't function as well or don't even have the resources necessary to work because they've been stolen from by fraudsters. I think an example that is particularly close to my heart because we have a 2-week-old newborn at home is a program that we set up through the Medicaid program to actually provide high-quality health care to new moms and to newborn infants. To people who can't afford high-quality health care, we, as a generous nation, ensure that they have access to the resources that they need. And yet, we have, working with DOJ and others, we have identified, prosecuted a number of cases of people where they have taken from this program, not provided an ounce of service to a new mom or a young baby, and enriched themselves by literally taking money from the medical care of newborn infants. This is despicable behavior, and it's something that we've allowed to go on for too long in the United States of America. I'm very proud that you could not just look at these sort of qualitative stories about what's going on, but we can actually measure the success of the Fraud Task Force. Working with Andrew Ferguson and with Steve Miller, two of the great all-stars of the Trump administration, we have been able to identify $230 billion of fraud just since the Fraud Task Force was set up, and that's frankly by conservatively estimating it. Andrew and I had a meeting in my office last week, and he said, do you want to estimate it conservatively or do you want to estimate it aggressively? And I said, well, I kind of want to estimate it aggressively, but then all you people will criticize us. So let's estimate it conservatively so that we can give the American people the most rock-solid explanation of how this task force is working to protect their money. We've been able to stop $56 billion in fraudulent payments that would have otherwise gone to fraudsters rather than to the people who need them. And in the process, we've saved, obviously, the American people a lot of money. But as much as we've done, and as much as we've had great successes, and this brings me to my final point before I kick it over to Andrew, this effort will fundamentally always have a limitation unless our colleagues in the House and the Senate are working with us. We don't want the next administration, whoever, God forbid, you're going to have President El Sayed in 3 years. We don't want him to undo all the incredible work that we've been doing when we've been taking out the fraudsters and saving the American people money. And in order to make this really work, we need our colleagues in Congress to really codify some of this stuff, to make sure that it becomes law. And again, this is the sort of thing where, while I see only Republicans surrounding us today, we really have been able to work in some cases with Democratic governors and Democratic attorneys generals on the anti-fraud task force. And we would love, I'm not necessarily holding my breath, but we would love to work with Democrats in Washington to codify some of the anti-fraud actions that we've taken and to take it to the next level. There are a few things that we really need to do and that we can't do at the federal government without the cooperation of the Congress. And the first, and I would say the most important of these, is data sharing. So when we've looked at the anti-fraud efforts that we've taken, one of the weirdest and most difficult parts of this is the black box that exists around certain state programs. So for example, the SNAP program, which provides food resources to low-income people, it quite literally feeds hungry moms and children in our country, something that is very important and that I know every person at this table supports. We know that there is a lot of fraud in the SNAP program. We know that there are illegal aliens who benefit from the SNAP program, people who have no legal right to be in the country. We would like to stop that. But I think the American people would be shocked to learn, because I was certainly shocked when I learned it a few months ago, that when we send tax dollars to the states to administer the SNAP program, we have no visibility into who is ultimately getting those benefits. In other words, if the state of California gives those food stamp benefits to an illegal alien, to a violent criminal, the federal government has no visibility, and sometimes the states themselves have no visibility. So we need to work with Congress, and we need some legislation that would actually force some data sharing between the state governments and the federal governments. We need to know where your tax dollars are going. And if the state of California or the state of New York isn't going to tell us, we need Congress to force them to tell us. And I think that's the first and most important thing that we would like to do. The second is that we would like to see stiffer penalties for fraudsters. One of the things I said at the very beginning of the task force is that I was shocked by how often we would just let low-level fraud go. Like $1 million of fraud, that's a lot of money. A person who had enriched themselves to the tune of $1 million, sometimes we wouldn't even prosecute this stuff. And even when we do prosecute it, we are limited by the penalties applied. The most important thing that we can do in prosecuting fraud is to make sure that the people who engage in fraud actually suffer some real penalties. And so we would love to work with all of you and see some stiffer penalties for the people that we're successfully prosecuting. We are throwing a lot of people behind bars, but we're limited in some ways, by the statutes that exist. We'd like to change those statutes and actually make it harder for people to commit fraud and make sure that when they do commit fraud, they go to jail, and they go to jail for a long time. And finally, we need a little bit of money, not a lot of money, and frankly, we're saving way more money than we're taking in, but the Fraud Task Force, it involves every single agency of the federal government. Every single cabinet secretary has been great, and I want to give a special shout out to some of our all-stars, Bobby Kennedy at H&HS, Kelly Loeffler at SBA, Brooke at the Department of Agriculture. We've really had a whole of government. Our soon-to-be new Attorney General, Todd Blanche, has just been amazing to work with, and I know other people will say more about that. But we need a little bit of resources, because while we're saving the American people billions and billions of dollars and we're not spending very much, we need a little bit more appropriated to expand this fraud effort. I think we'll save even more money in the process. It's the sort of investment that, unlike most of the money you guys spend, it never comes back to D.C. Every dollar you give us comes back at least 5 or 10-fold. So it's a good investment, and it's the sort of thing that we need to see happen. But without further ado, I want to kick it over to our amazing co-chair of the task force, Andrew Ferguson. You see him on TV. He's amazing, but most importantly, behind the scenes when he's not on TV, he's doing amazing things for the American people. This whole thing would not work and would not work as well were it not for Andrew's hard work. So great job. Great to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, and welcome to all my friends from the Senate and from the House. We're very pleased that you're here. I want to thank President Trump for creating this task force and assembling us here today. He is the first president in American history to take this fraud issue, which is an existential crisis for the American Republic, seriously, and none of this would have been possible without him. And second, the Vice President. The only way to confront fraud through the whole federal government is to have the guy that sits atop the rest of the federal government in charge of it. Nothing that this task force has accomplished, and the Vice President just read a lot of the amazing accomplishments of the task force and the whole federal government, is possible without the leadership of the Vice President of the United States. Fraud is not just about the numbers. We hear about the big numbers, we just heard them today, but fraud hurts real people. It hurts all of us by taking our hard-earned money out of our pockets and putting it into the hands of the most reprehensible people in this country. And second, it hurts real people in specific physical ways. The best example I have of this involves skin substitutes. Fraudsters, up until this year, were performing unnecessary surgeries on elderly Americans in hospices and nursing homes because they would then submit those claims to HHS, and HHS was reimbursing those claims to the tune of billions and billions of dollars a year. Fraud doesn't just hurt us all in our pocketbooks, it physically is maiming real Americans, and that's what this is about. It's not about the numbers at the end of the day, it is about protecting ordinary Americans from the worst of us. The second thing about this fraud effort that is so important is that it is about restoring social trust in America. All of the programs that the fraud effort has focused on were set up for a high-trust society. The Vice President was just explaining the difficulty in obtaining data to fight fraud. When Congress was creating these programs, some of them almost 100 years ago, we didn't expect that these programs were going to be attacked by fraudsters to the tunes of billions and billions of dollars a year. We expected, because that's the America that we were, that everyone would play by the rules, that the money turned over to help our friends, our families, and neighbors would be made available only to the people who really needed it. And that is just not true anymore. And so this effort is not just about protecting our programs, making sure that fraudsters don't bleed them so dry that they cease to exist. It's also about restoring social trust in this country. And so with that, I want to talk about two of the things that I think Congress can do to help us address both of those problems. The first is on social trust, and the Vice President touched on this just a minute ago. People commit fraud against our programs because it is relatively easy. And one of the reasons that it is easy is that the punishments associated with much of the fraud are relatively low. We have seen what can happen in America when you really vigorously enforce the laws. Just take the last year and a half in this country. Violent crime is at an all-time low, and that's for two reasons. Number one, thanks to President Trump and Stephen Miller and others in the administration, the border is sealed and the criminals are not coming here anymore. And number two, thanks to Todd Blanche and the men and women at the Justice Department, we are vigorously enforcing our criminal laws and making sure that people who commit crimes suffer the consequences. That has to be true for the fraudsters. Every single person who considers raiding one of our agencies and taking money out of our pockets needs to think long and hard about what might happen to them if they are caught. And under this Justice Department, they will be caught. And so we want to work with Congress to dramatically increase the sentences associated, even with low-level frauds, to incent both the Justice Department to prosecute all fraud all the time, and to make every fraudster think long and hard about whether it's worth facing a long time in jail before deciding to raid our programs. And then the second thing that we need to focus on has to do with another thing that the Vice President talked about, which is data sharing. Fraud is easy because data is difficult to get, and data is the enemy of fraud. One of the things that the Vice President has accomplished using this task force is that almost all of the agencies are now using automated, AI-driven tools to find the fraud before the money leaves the agency. But the only way that works is if we have data. And right now, data sharing is difficult, and for a lot of our programs like SNAP, which is an incredibly important program that we want to protect in this country, like the Vice President was just explaining, states don't have to share data with us in order to participate in the program. Data sharing should be a requirement for participating in these programs because that will unleash the power of American AI ingenuity and innovation in these agencies to stop the fraud before it happens. Because once it goes out the door, it's very difficult to get back. The pay and chase doesn't work. And so the way you stop fraud is you keep Americans' hard-earned money in the agencies unless it's going to someone who actually needs it. And for that, we need data. We need data to make sure fraudsters don't get it, non-citizens don't get it, and the only way for that to happen is if we have data. And the easiest way for that to happen is not through rulemakings, it's not through guidance, it's Congress stepping up and saying, if you want to participate in these programs, if you want access to American taxpayer dollars, you have to share data so that we can fight fraud. And any state who doesn't want to share data, we should learn a lot about the leadership of that state. If they want to protect fraud more than they want to protect ordinary Americans, something really rotten is happening in that state. So those are just two of the things that we want to work with Congress to accomplish here under the Vice President's task force. And with that, I'll turn it over to Stephen Miller.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for your leadership on this bold and existentially important initiative. Thank you to Mr. Ferguson for your incredible work and stewardship of this task force. And of course, thank you to President Trump for his extraordinary leadership in establishing this task force, assigning this portfolio to the Vice President, and providing direction, focus, and determination to the whole U.S. government. It's great to see all of my friends in the House and Senate who are here today, who have been such tremendous allies, not only on this issue, but so many issues, and in some cases for a very, very long time, since 2015 and before. And so, thank you all. I want to pick up, because this is something that I've encountered on a daily basis, on a theme that both the Vice President and Andrew Ferguson have mentioned, which is the lack of criminal responsibility, the lack of criminal punishment for egregious fraud in this country. It is, first of all, true, as the Vice President said, as hard as it is to believe, that for most recent history, which in the case of these programs would be in the history of these programs, if you committed $1 million of fraud or less, you were unlikely to ever be criminally punished in any way at all. And if for some strange reason in the past, a bureaucrat had the courage to defy that agency guidance and actually bring you to trial and put you in front of a jury, you'd be unlikely to do any real jail time at all. And this may be hard to believe, that you could steal hundreds of thousands and ultimately millions of dollars and not do any significant jail time. Again, you can look at the sentences for the Feeding Our Futures fraud, which is one of the largest frauds in the history of any country anywhere in Minnesota, to see this. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think probably the simplest, least conspiratorial explanation is that when Congress was drafting these statutes, they still lived, to use the phrase being used in a high-trust society, and it eclipsed their imagination that there would be systemic, widespread, continual lying, fleecing, and organized crime to rip off hundreds of billions of dollars from the American taxpayer, which is what has happened. So there needs to be strict, clear, mandatory minimums. Because by the time you've been convicted, you have already proven to a jury, this is not a civil punishment, this is you've proven to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that you deliberately, willfully, maliciously engage in a scheme to steal from the American taxpayer and from those in genuine need. And when you've satisfied 12 jurors of that fact and been convicted, you deserve to have a very substantial prison sentence. That change alone would be watershed for fighting fraud, because it would mean that the Department of Justice would be able to, through prosecuting a few hundred or thousand cases in a year, be able to chill the criminal conduct of millions. Whereas right now, no matter how many people you prosecute, you're still left with the criminal element thinking, I'm willing to risk 6 months in jail for $5 million in ill-gotten gains. And we've reached a point, and again, only because of President Trump and the Vice President's leadership is this happening. We've reached a point as a country, until we came along, as hard as it is to believe, where we have federal law enforcement in cities around the country who have to conduct weeks or months-long investigations of daycares where there are no children present at all, to be able to then go into a court of law and say, no kids on Monday, no kids on Tuesday, no kids on Wednesday, no kids on Thursday, right? And this is the real thing. We have federal law enforcement officers who then they have to issue subpoenas and search warrants to get phone records, email records, financial records. And what does it all end up with? You go to a jury in Minnesota and you say the defendant has collected $7 million for a daycare, claiming to be taking care of 100 children for 6 months, and we found one kid attended in that entire time, and he was the nephew. So you spent months of federal effort. When you do that and you're found guilty, you belong in jail for a very long time. I'm almost over my own time here, so I'll just add to the other point the Vice President said, which is on data sharing and technology and integrity, you can solve 95% of this problem with simple technological verification and data sharing measures that is in technology that was invented 20 years ago. Now, the technology today, of course, is even more astonishing. But if every single person who wanted to enroll in SNAP or enroll in Medicaid or enroll in public housing was in a shared database that the federal government had access to verify age, citizenship, criminal record, other basic biographic facts, that single step alone would save taxpayers hundreds of billions of dollars. And you have to ask yourself, why would any politician oppose something so fundamental? We're not even debating eligibility rules, an important but separate debate. We are debating whether or not a person is lying to the government to extract funds for which they are plainly and clearly ineligible. The time has come to implement these reforms. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thanks, Steve. Vince?
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. We gather today because President Trump has made stopping the fraud and corruption in our welfare programs a governing priority. Thank you to Vice President Vance, Chairman Ferguson, Stephen Miller, and Executive Director Brady for their leadership in carrying out this duty, and to the members of Congress here for joining in this important work. In the time I have, I wish to offer 10 very practical, common sense, and likely very popular proposals to fight fraud in our welfare programs for congressional consideration. 1, all government agencies must verify that every Medicaid provider or SNAP retail store is actually legitimate and eligible for payment before any payment is issued, rather than paying first and checking later. 2, require criminal background checks and fingerprinting for healthcare providers in categories with high rates of Medicaid fraud, and re-verify provider credentials at least every 3 years. 3, require states to verify every welfare applicant through the federal government's free database system that verifies immigration status in real time before issuing any taxpayer-funded benefits. 4, require states to compare welfare rolls every month against death records, wage records, and incarceration records. 5, double the number of welfare fraud investigators so that more fraud and corruption cases can be aggressively investigated and prosecuted. 6, upgrade welfare benefit cards used for food and cash assistance to have secure chip technology with a photo and expiration date. 7, prohibit high-risk retailers, such as some liquor stores and smoke shops, from accepting taxpayer-funded food stamp benefits. 8, end the use of government-issued pre-populated forms to do automatic re-enrollments into Medicaid. 9, eliminate so-called self-attestation, which allows applicants to simply report their own income and household information on welfare applications without providing documentation, and instead requiring proof of income and eligibility before benefits are approved. 10, require state taxpayer-funded Medicaid programs that issue payments to health insurance companies on behalf of people who had already died to stop immediately once a death is recorded, and require those insurance companies to return any money collected after the enrollee's death. Finally, I suggest that members of Congress call out as corruption the behavior of state and local leaders who refuse to enforce common sense fraud controls or purposely embrace loopholes that avoid individual eligibility validation, allow self-certification of eligibility, expand eligibility far beyond what Congress intended, and as a result trap millions of able-bodied adults into a life of dependency. Fraud steals taxpayer dollars, but such corruption steals something even more precious. It steals the blessings and benefits of work. The greater injustice is not stealing money from taxpayers. It is taking purpose from another human being and diverting resources from the truly needy. Every year an able-bodied person spends trapped in unnecessary dependency is a year not spent developing skills, earning promotions, providing for a family, serving a community, or discovering what they are capable of becoming. This corruption fraud occurs when public officials knowingly tolerate or design systems that deny people the benefits and blessings of work because dependency serves personal, political, or institutional interests. Whenever public officials knowingly preserve systems that deny able-bodied Americans the blessings of work, whenever they choose to look away because dependency serves such interests, people suffer, not because they lack talent, not because they lack dignity, but because those entrusted with public authority failed to act. Our responsibility is to root out fraud and corruption in our welfare systems, send people to jail who steal benefits, and make it impossible for public officials to escape their responsibility to establish systems of accountability and program integrity so that more Americans will realize the benefits and blessings of work. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Vince, and thanks to everybody else for being here. We're now going to have a conversation about exactly how we can better work together, about how we can advance some of these legislative priorities. But we're going to do that conversation without 100 cameras in the room. So to the press, thank you for being here. We'll see you soon.
Robert F. Kennedy cares more about human beings and health than anybody. I'm going to let him go wild on health. I'm going to let him go wild on the food. I'm going to let him go wild on medicines. And he's going to help make America healthy again.
The story of Kennedy and Trump has changed the course of history forever. August 23, 2024 will forever be known as the day we turned the corner and took back our great nation and changed the course of history and brought hope to a free world. Join me as we relive the strange relationship between Kennedy and Trump leading to their return to the White House to make America healthy and great again. I spent 2 years following the Kennedy and Trump campaigns. Long before the two men ever considered running for president, Kennedy sued Trump and stopped him from building a golf course near the Hudson River. After Trump won the presidency in 2016, he recruited Kennedy to look into vaccine safety issues. Kennedy was forced out the door after clashing with a man by the name of Anthony Fauci. But the assassination attempt on President Trump's life brought Kennedy and Trump closer than ever. From rivals to collaborators, from foes to friends, this is the story of Kennedy and Trump. You can download the book for free right now by going to kennedy&trump.com. That's kennedy&trump.com. My name is Greg Fernandez Jr. God bless you all.